on the continent. Now we move on, and as the India-Africa Summit comes to an end in New Delhi, in India today, the week was considered to be a fantastic success. This year was the first time all 54 African heads of state were invited. The summit is regarded as the biggest one held in India since the country's hosting of the Non-Aligned and Commonwealth summits in 1983. More than 400 business delegates from Africa participated in the business exhibition, which covered diverse sectors from energy and health to infrastructure and innovation. Now, India is interested in Africa's natural resources, while African countries want to benefit from Indian expertise in high-tech sectors such as IT and mobile phones. The South African Institute of International Affairs Chief Executive Elizabeth Sidiropoulos is with us here in studio this morning to talk a little bit about what came out this week. Very good morning to you.
Hi, Evan.
An interesting one, this one. Suddenly, India has put itself forward as the next great trading partner of Africa at large. How do you read this almost a little bit of shift? Is there a competitive edge with China developing?
Well, there has been, I suppose, for some time, not only with India, but with a number of other external partners of Africa. This, of course, is a step up from the initial two summits that India held in 2008 and then again in 2011, where it invited a select group of participants. It was really the chairs of the regional economic communities and the NEPAD 5 and the chair of the AU Commission. And this was after an agreement with the AU to actually manage the process and not necessarily to have it a very huge jamboree. This time I think it's a step up. Clearly more than 40 heads of state, I think, in the end arrived in New Delhi, and it is really about a couple of factors. It's both the economic dimension, and we've seen particularly under Prime Minister Modi a greater focus on economic diplomacy and taking India out there in terms of its trading relationships, and there's clearly a geopolitical aspect to it in terms of access to African markets and African partners.
Narendra Modi's also pledged $600 million to the continent for development projects. How do you see that, and what do you think those projects will be?
Well, this is, of course, not new. Many Indian companies have, of course, been involved in Africa and have been present in Africa even before India began the more substantial political and diplomatic engagement. What India has done over the last several years, and this is simply an additional step up, is provide lines of credit for Indian companies to be able to work on African projects with guarantees from the Exim Bank of India. And that already has seen sort of over 140 projects and credit lines of about $7.5 billion over the last 6 years. So this is simply the next step in it. I think infrastructure clearly is one area. IT could be in agriculture. These are the areas, and innovation. These are the areas in which India has had a presence in Africa.
The summit comes to an end today. What do you think some of the other things that came out? There were discussions around climate change, for instance. What were some of the other points you think that the world should know about?
Well, I think what is important is that over the last two summits, the focus has largely been on trade, technology and training. And I think if we're looking at taking this relationship into a new dimension, it is about talking about some of these global challenges. Clearly, climate change is one of those. There might be, Africa and India might not have the same perspectives on when you go down to the micro level in terms of issues of climate change and COP21. There are issues of maritime security where clearly there are areas of convergence, and the Indian Ocean, and using the blue economy, which is an important initiative in South Africa and the continent, and is now also an important initiative in India to identify areas of collaboration. And so I would see this as a summit that has taken the relationship in terms of the content to another level.
South Africa in particular, or you see the ocean economy, Operation Phakisa, for instance, you expect there to be much cooperation. I think South Africa has identified this as an area of exponential growth in the next decade.
And this is also the area in which India in terms of its own exclusive economic zone, has identified. And so clearly, one of the points that was also made before the summit began by the Indian government was that this was definitely an area that required further discussion and identification of areas of cooperation, both in the areas of security, but also in the areas of economic opportunity, and certainly overlaps there.
Do you see a medium-term future where we might see an Indo-African maritime force patrolling our waters and our coastlines? No?
I suppose it's a little too early to discuss that, but there's certainly, I think there is a clear recognition of the importance of creating infrastructure that allows us to be able to secure our maritime borders on the continent. And so clearly there could be a great deal of collaboration with India, given also the fact that India is expanding its naval capabilities. And I think apart from South Africa, I think most African countries have a deficit in that area.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. That's Elizabeth Sidiropoulos. She's the Chief Executive of the South African Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for joining us, giving us unique insights into the Indo-African Summit. Shift in momentum, some is what some people are calling it. Well, another shift in momentum.